These are the Hearthians from the 2019 video game Outer Wilds. Hailing from a cute planet called Timber Hearth, you can be forgiven for believing this isn't a technologically advanced species. And in a solar system where you find futuristic discoveries, it's actually a fair assessment of the instruments and machines that you use in the game. You may play as an astronaut and part of a spacefaring civilization, but there's quite a difference between your trusty wooden spaceship literally held together by tape and the high-tech vehicles of the other species in the game. But as with everything in life, that's all relative, and the Hearthians actually have pretty cool toys when you stop and pay attention to them. Knowledge is also relative. And here's a warning that this video will show clips from many locations of the game. Although I'm not going to talk in any specifics about the story, I am going to refer to secret locations and core game mechanics. If you're worried about spoilers, as you should be in a game like this, subscribe and come back to this video when your Outer Wilds journey is complete. Arguably the most critical piece of Hearthian tech in the game is the one that you, the hatchling, is the first to use in space. The Translator Tool. You might be able to fly around in a spaceship, hear music from distant planets with your signal scope, and take real-time photos of anywhere you like with your scout, but completing Outer Wilds would not be possible if you couldn't understand the Nomai text that they left behind. The Nomai were very nerdy with their conversations, and you'll often come across unusual turns of phrase which can seem in keeping with the quirks of this species of space geeks. However, there is another, more real-world and trivial explanation for a Nomai going gelatinous or having a locomotive limb. Anyone who speaks a second language or has travelled to a country with another tongue will be familiar with funny translations that are almost, but not quite, right. Applying Occam's razor to the Nomai's words can easily suggest these are slight mistranslations of your translator tool rather than imprecise language by a species that loves precision. I'd even argue that the developers threw some deliberately misleading translations in to screw with the players. I know I'm not the only one who thought the vessel was a living thing when reading that it wasn't well. Switching that well text to functional, working, or okay quickly removes this ambiguity. There is a curious example though of two half-correct translations that slightly contradict each other with this theory, with Privet saying on the other appendage and Collius choosing to say on the opposite hand instead. I put this down to the same logic of Google Translate changing its mind over the same text in our world though, but let me know your thoughts by using your appendages to comment below. No journey to space is really complete without using your little scout. The signal scope is very useful for finding points of interest early in the game, but when you learn where the points of interest are, it diminishes its usefulness a little bit, while the little scout remains your trusty tool from start to finish. Taking photos to check out where you're heading before making what would otherwise be leaps of faith is incredibly useful. But I was surprised to find the scout isn't a simple camera that spins around and rotates at your will, but is actually 4 separate cameras that you can switch between. Looking closely at it once you've sent it out to explore, and you'll see that yes, it does spin, but angling up or down is actually the feed switching between a 0 degree, 30 degree, 60 degree and 90 degree camera. And in true Outer Wilds attention to detail, there are even 4 cables, one from each camera, that feed through the housing before transmitting their picture back to your spacesuit or spaceship. Exploration in the game is mostly done on foot, with your hatchling gradually going from treating the ship like a Ming vase on the first landing to a heap of junk by the time you finish the game. But the HUD of your spacesuit and the display of your spaceship are closely linked together, but not many players will see some messages appear on your ship's display thanks to that on-foot traversal. Discovering a frequency, for example, or finding out the surface integrity of where the little scout is will usually only show on the player's spacesuit's display. But if you're quick enough or don't recall your scout, you can see these messages appear on your ship, showing that Slate is actually quite a smart computer developer as well as an engineer, even if their autopilot programming is something to be desired. The same tools you use in your spacesuit are also usable in your spaceship, and again, with great attention to detail, the animators went to the trouble of showing them moving when the hatchling uses them from inside the cockpit. The excellent no-clip documentary explains that they even wanted all of the dials and gauges in the ship to be functional and correct, but ultimately only some are usable and relevant. But they did get the satellite dish to rotate, ready to pick up audio when you use a signal scope from the ship. You might not notice this when you play because the frequency display also appears simultaneously, but check out the top left of the screen here. That grey block is actually the dish coming out to point forward, as you can see if you use the free look option. And you won't be surprised to know that the same goes for the scout launcher if you look in the top right instead, which you can see shoot off the little scout when you use it from the ship. Equally, if you check the ship before you fire it off, you'll even see it sitting in the barrel of the launch device, but if you fire it off from inside the ship and then go out and check again, sure enough, it's no longer there. An easy to miss piece of dialogue in the game about your ship answers an easy to miss possible plot hole for experienced gamers. The hatchling and Gabbro are the only Hearthians aware of the time loop and therefore can keep their memories intact after every death. But so is your ship, and more specifically your ship log. Long-term gamers will be well used to hand-wavy game mechanics like carrying 500 cheese wheels in your pockets on Skyrim or pulling a rocket launcher from thin air in Grand Theft Auto. We'd be fine if there wasn't an explanation for why your ship log also remembers your adventures of previous loops and just put it down to a useful game mechanic. But a conversation option with HAL that only appears before you get the launch codes and only if you speak to them twice reveals that there is something surprising that links you and your ship. The Nomai statue that pairs with you was chipped by Gabbro, and that stone fragment from the chip was repurposed for your ship's computer. You'll notice that the glowing blue effect you can see in several Nomai locations also features below your ship's computer screen, but this only happens if something has been updated on your ship log since the last time that you checked it. No updates? No glow. Your ship goes through a lot of damage over the game. There's no player who hasn't damaged their landing gear or never seen a crack in the windshield, but not everyone has seen the ship blow up, which is a fun surprise the first time. And it's even more fun if you get to see it happen when you're not even in your ship, as demonstrated here by my girlfriend in the playthrough on this channel.
What just happened? What just happened?
I swear she's accidentally seen things that even the biggest Outer Worlds fans have never seen. But a lesser spotted error is one that'll leave the player more or less stranded on the celestial body they're on unless they've mastered the interplanet Little Scout propulsion system. The ship can run out of fuel if you damage it enough, leading to this alarming message on your display. Even though you can refuel your jetpack in this state, indicating there's some fuel somewhere, you can't refuel your ship even if you repair it. And something even rarer is to see the warning that the fuel tank is damaged, though you really have to go out of your way to make this happen. If you catch this warning, you can go out and repair the damage and even see the fuel leaking out of your ship. When you get back to the cockpit, use the free look option to see how close you were to being empty by checking this fuel gauge that you've never noticed before that does actually accurately change value. The Hearthian's ship is quite an emblematic feature of the game, but there is no such thing as a single Hearthian ship, seeing as all of the travellers have slightly different versions from the one that you pilot. Feldspar, the original traveller, has a super simple design for theirs, with only a cockpit and small central hull section, showing that they likely haven't had Slate upgrade theirs. A nimble, no-fuss design is also perfect for a fearless pilot when they want to avoid anglerfish. Church's ship has multiple cockpit windows, which would be perfect for looking at the stars to update the star charts that they're so obsessed with. Rebex has a whopping 4 orange tanks, double what the hatchling has on their ship. Reading their logs around space shows how apprehensive they are about space travel, suggesting their piloting might not be the strongest talent that they have, so Slate adding extra fuel to balance out any dodgy steering does make sense. Equally, they are the archaeologists, so it's also possible the plan was to bring back a load of Nomai artifacts from a bunch of trips around all the planets. While it's unusual to run out of petrol in the time loop, that extra rocket fuel would be plenty helpful for many trips to the Nomai's settlements and going back to Timber Hearth. Interestingly, Gabbro's ship is the most similar to the players. This could be a deliberate parallel, of course. Gabbro is the most similar Hearthian to the hatchling because of their awareness of the time loop, but I'm just speculating here. And a shout out to the low resolution ship on the Atoll Rock. This might be Esker's, seeing as there is no other ship on Timber Hearth's moon, but the real world boring answer to this is that it was the original design of the hatchling's ship that the developers put into the final game. That's a lot about the spaceship, so let's head back home to the tech that the Hearthians have on Timber Hearth. The Nomai's presence is very much felt in a lot of the hatchling's home world. You enter your ship through a Nomaian space elevator, the museum has a gravity crystal on the wall, and to get into mining site 2B you have to play with one of the Nomai's balls. That really sounds bad, doesn't it? But there is something a lot more simple that the Hearthians use, which seems to be their own creation. The way to easily navigate through the village is via 3 elevators. The first one you'll likely use is to access the Zero G cave, and the one you'll use by far the most is the one to access your ship. But there is a trio of elevators, with this wood rising one on the descent from the observatory somewhat hidden away and often missed in the playthroughs that I've watched. Using this doesn't access anywhere new, but it does make it much quicker to get between the observatory and the lowest level of the village without the maze of pathways in between. Oh, and although elevators aren't exactly cutting edge technology, the Hearthians have installed some automatic sensor for the launchpad elevator to descend down to you if you've jumped down to the ground in your suit just by the hatchling being nearby. That's great and all, but it does result in this awful death if you're not careful, complete with a disgusting death sound effect. If you've played the DLC, you won't be surprised to know there's a satellite hanging out way on a perpendicular orbit to the planets. This satellite is the in-game lore for how you have a live map view of everything going on. Like the ship log using a chip from the memory statue, this doesn't need to be included as maps are so often in games without any explanation. It is pretty cool though that they explained how the player can see the solar system, and the fact that they use it later on for a clue is even better. Best of all, if you knock it out of orbit, you'll lose the map feature entirely and have to rely on your 4 Hearthian eyes to spot the planets manually to head to your next destination. But there is another unmanned Hearthian object you can hit too for an even funnier outcome. Before I get to that, I know how YouTube works, so let me do a brief outro here to keep you around and not tank the view retention rate. This is a channel dedicated to Outer Wilds, so if you enjoyed this video, check out the others on the channel for more trivia and subscribe if you want to see new ones in the future. Likes and comments also help the videos reach fellow fans of this incredible game, and there are always some amazing extra facts to be found below by the awesome community in here. Thanks to everybody for your support. Back to that unmanned Hearthian object though. The postcards from Orbit exhibition is one of the first things you'll find in the game. You'll likely not realise it at the time, but the snapshots you take are formed real time from a scout that constantly loops around Timber Hearth. Players will see the instruction to try and snap a photo of the village and then be confused why there isn't any objective completed or goal ticked off like in other games, and will soon forget about this whole mini-game for want of a better word. But you can actually see the scout orbiting the planet when you look around either from the surface or from space. And to highlight how real-time the postcards are, you can hit the scout with your ship and knock it down to the ground. And if you time it just right and send the scout into a geyser, you'll see something very unusual about the hit zone detection between the planet and the scout when you go back to see the postcards. The funny thing is that although the scout seems to ignore any waterway propulsion or the walls of the cave system, it does still obey gravity. Taking snapshots will show it constantly rising and falling around the center of the planet, allowing you to see the odd maze sitting beneath you whenever you're on home soil. Are there any bits of Hearthian technology that I missed? Let me know by commenting below and they might feature in a future video, with all credit to you. That's all for now though, I'll let you go off and knock the scout out of its orbit for yourself. Until next time, be curious on your journey.